Welcome into another Monday playoff edition of Daily Faceoff Live. As always, streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, where we're looking for your inbox questions for later on. And as always, we are a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Happy Memorial Day to everybody in the United States. Everybody north of the border, like Carter Hutton and I, happy Monday. It's just a normal Monday for us, Huts.
That's it. We already had our Monday off last week, the big holiday weekend. So, happy holidays to everybody south of us. But for us, Ty, let's get to work, baby.
Yeah, we just get to talk hockey. Let's start with that Edmonton-Dallas series. We're going to break down everything playoff related. We're going to talk about Mathieu Darche getting hired out on Long Island. Huts has the big segment today as we'll talk some goaltending too. But speaking of goaltending, Stuart Skinner with another excellent performance. The Edmonton Oilers are up 2-1 on the Dallas Stars. And Huts, it's easy to look back at game one of this series and be like, man, if Edmonton doesn't have a horrible stretch on the penalty kill, or if Dallas doesn't put the pedal down on the power play, whichever way you want to view it, there's a world where Edmonton's up 3-0 in this Western Conference final. But as the series shifted to Rogers Place, the Oilers, they throttled the Stars on the scoreboard 6-1. Even if the game itself didn't have the feel of a blowout until very late, still an impressive Oilers victory.
A huge win, at home ice too. You could feel the energy in the crowd. I know it's a little more close to home for you, but even through the TV watching that game, you could feel the energy and the build up to this game. I think that being said, this team is starting to believe more and more, right? The way the playoffs started and the way it started going now with Stuart Skinner, obviously Kelvin Pickard, there's so many storylines around this team. I think that's something you can build upon. Even the depth scoring that the Edmonton has been getting has been awesome. And again, Connor McDavid was outstanding yesterday. I look at that goal at the end of the second period as a big difference maker in a 2-1 hockey game where he's able to, I don't think there's another player in the league with as quick feet on a turnaround there, on a turnover, to stop and get going the other way to finish in the last 30 seconds of a period. So that being said, there's still a lot to do. There's going to be a pushback from Dallas in the next game. They're going to make adjustment, but it's good to see Stuart Skinner coming out of his shell. I think his comments after about FaceTime his family, dealing with this, having the city behind him, and that it's kind of a good story. And that being said, goaltending is about being Jekyll and Hyde at times and managing it and having experience. And I think right now you're seeing experienced Edmonton Oilers team here, drawing upon last year and being in this big moment here.
Yeah, I saw, a handful of Stars fans as I peruse Twitter and I read different things. A lot of people were like, man, not fair. Like, how does Dallas play that well and lose the game 6-1? And they were at times. Like, that second period was all Stars. They score a goal. You're thinking, okay, it's 2-1 heading into the third. It's going to be a tight hockey game. Then McDavid scores with 20 seconds left. But you can sit there and look at whatever expected goals model, blah, blah, blah. And yes, like, I'm fully saying the Stars were the better team at 5-on-5 in that hockey game, but it's also a lesson in what makes this Oilers team dangerous. You can play as well as Dallas did, but then you give up a 3-on-1 to Connor McDavid and the top line of the Oilers, bang, they burn you. You give McDavid a little bit too much space at the end of the second period, bang, he burns you. Zach Hyman catches the Stars snoozing a little bit or pushing for offense, bang, they burn you. Like, they don't need 40 shots to score 6 goals. They can get outplayed for 15 minutes, bend, don't break, and then boom, their first chance back the other way, they kill you.
And it just shows you the offensive firepower they have. And that being said, I think there's a confidence now in Skinner too. And I feel like I've seen this firsthand and I've dealt with it as a goalie and seeing it around the NHL where when your goalie isn't making a timely save here or there, you start to kind of collapse a little bit. And that being said, I feel like we're seeing that on the other side of it right now where Jake Ottinger just hasn't been able to make that timely save when there has been an odd man rush and there has been chances. And that being said, it's going to be very hard to hold this Edmonton team back with the firepower they have, how they can spread the rink out, how they're aggressive on turnovers. And it's been fun to watch. So that being said, there's still a big challenge. There's still a big challenge ahead. I think there's going to be a push. But right now, I think this Edmonton Oilers team is heading in the right direction.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of people who are already talking about, Stanley Cup final rematch. And it's like, whoa. You can say that about Florida. They're up 3-0. We'll talk about them in a second. Edmonton's only up 2-1. This series could still have a much, much different feel after game 4 in Edmonton. The swing game, they call it. Going back to Friday, Huts, there was the slash by Darnell Nurse. And it obviously was a storyline that bled into game 4 because Rupe Hintz took warm-ups, only skated for about 4 minutes, was in some pain, talked to the trainer. He was down the tunnel. I guess, what did you make of that slash from Darnell Nurse? And what did you make of the comments after from Pete DeBoer?
No, I think Pete DeBoer does a good job of protecting his players. You see it all the time. He's never anyone to throw under the bus. Like we've seen Rod Brindamore as of late, talking about the way that his players need to play and his stars has been, irrelevant in that series. But again, these are slashes that go on all the time throughout a series, right? There's cross checks, there's slashes. It's a vicious game out there, and guys are playing to hurt. That being said, you never want to see anyone get hurt. But I also feel like for his situation, it just was on the wrong spot. Yes, it wasn't a clean play, but when you watch the playoffs closely, this is going on, all the time. And I feel for Roope Hintz, but that being said, Darnell Nurse is not going to change the way he plays. He's going to play a hard-nosed game, and if someone happens to get hurt in the meantime, you're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, DeBoer saying after that, I would love to see how that would have been handled if it was Connor McDavid who got slashed, not Roope Hintz. Some numbers behind that. Roope Hintz has drawn the second most penalties in the entire Stanley Cup playoffs. And if you go penalties drawn per 60 in these playoffs of all the players who are still alive, Roope Hintz is 7th in the league. Connor McDavid all the way down at 49th. But I digress on that point, I suppose. We'll have more Stars and Oilers talk tomorrow as we get set for Game 4 of that series. Game 4 between Florida and Carolina. That goes tonight, and it's the Panthers who have a chance to sweep away the Canes on home ice. A very tough task for Carolina. Down 3-0 in any scenario is bad. Having to keep your season alive on the road when you've just been thoroughly outplayed and outclassed for 3 straight games, it's not easy. And as much as you want to do the whole, hey, take it one game at a time and all of that, man, that'd be hard to have, especially with kind of what we've been hearing out of that Canes locker room. Like Jordan Staal after the game point blank said, that was an ass kicking. Like it's not a Carolina team who's sitting there going, we got some good things to build off of.
Yeah, and that's the biggest problem, I think, for me is a Carolina Hurricanes team that builds off of, creating an energy and creating havoc on the other team. What I've really noticed in this series, Ty, is Florida has gotten under their skin, whether it's Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett, Matthew Tkachuk, which we knew going into this series, going into the playoffs, those players were going to be a key role for Florida. But Carolina seems to get off base here. This is a team that usually just chugs ahead full steam and keeps coming at you in waves. And now that lack of offense, and I think the early offense for Florida in these games has really thrown a wrench into Carolina's game plan to how to attack the Florida Panthers. So that being said, there's going to be a big challenge here ahead for the Carolina Hurricanes because I don't think they're just going to lay down and just get swept. They're going to push back. But their stars need to be better. This is a league built on superstars, and I think we're seeing it firsthand now with this Carolina Hurricanes team. They don't really have that star game-changing player in their lineup. It's usually winning by committee. And like Rod Brindamore said, when Jordan Martinook and Jordan Staal are your best players, you're going to be in trouble in the Eastern Conference Finals.
I didn't like that quote. And I don't know if it's just me being too sensitive, but you say that, and it's very obviously meant to be a shot at the Ahos and the Svechnikovs and the guys who are supposed to be their drivers and their best players. But also if I was Jordan Martinook or Jordan Staal, I'd be sitting there being like, why are you bringing us? What? Oh, we're not good enough for you?
Well, you know what? The thing for me is I look at teams that win. I look at the way Paul Maurice manages his team. I look, Peter DeBoer is never saying anything poorly about his players, publicly. He spins it in the light to the other team. And again, look at John Cooper, the run he's had with Tampa Bay Lightning. One thing I found in common when they talk about that is the team coaches itself, right? You get to a point where the team has to run the room. The team has to be motivated. And what I find with Rod Brindamore, his energy and his enthusiasm over an 82-game schedule, playoffs, year after year, it starts to wear thin. So I feel like you have to get guys to motivate. These are players making millions of dollars, Ty. They have to find a way to motivate themselves. It can't always be by what the coach is saying.
Yeah, and listen, I know that the MO in Carolina is if we just keep getting, cracks at it, if we keep making the Stanley Cup playoffs with decent rosters, eventually the breaks go your way and you get there. But there's also a point here. If they do end up getting swept tonight, where you said it, they don't have that high-end skill, that game breaker, and I know they tried for Mikko Rantanen and it just didn't work out, and you very clearly need like a specific type of player to work there. But the fact we could potentially be talking about a third straight time where a Rod Brindamore-led Canes team is swept in the Eastern Conference Final, and it's the same issue plaguing them time and time again, like it's something, at some point, something's got to give.
Yeah, I don't know if you put that on ownership, not being able to get a guy in there or spend the money, because I know they are managed differently from an ownership group and how they want to allocate funds to players and stars. But that being said, there's that like happy medium. He still is getting there consistently and making this team get over the top. But I don't know how they get back to a Stanley Cup playoff. When we look at other teams, and every year when there's a superstar that wins a cup, they're a difference maker come this time of year.
Yeah. One way Carolina is going to keep getting through is just the fact that the Metropolitan Division stinks and it doesn't really have any signs of life going forward either. Like when you look at the bottom teams in that division and even the teams who are around Carolina, I don't see any that are like, ooh, they're a piece away from being a legit Stanley Cup contender. Like Washington was a good story this year. I don't know how good they're going to be going forward. New Jersey, I think, is, interesting if they ever get healthy. But like Carolina is also in just a painfully mid division, and that's probably going to help them and might even lead to them not making sweeping changes because they'll sit there and be like, we should win the division next season no matter what.
Yeah, and that being said, like, honestly, I think you look at the playoffs beforehand, it's kind of playing out how we thought, right? It was a weaker Metro division, and all year we kind of thought that almost finishing in that wild card spot, you wanted to have to play in the Metro. I think for the Habs, getting a chance to play Washington to compete in the Metro was a better chance of getting through. The Atlantic was a much tougher division, and now we're seeing it firsthand. And again, I don't see any changes coming. Bettman has announced that, he loves the brackets. He loves keeping it regional. He loves it that way. We're not going to go back to that 1-8 seeding where when we look at this matchup again, getting swept in the Eastern Conference Final isn't good for hockey either, right? Where the 1-8 format, I don't know if this would play out the same way, getting better teams spread out across the division earlier. But that being said, Carolina's got to change something, right? I think at some point the fans, you want to get pushed over the top. I'm sure if you're a Leafs fan, kind of happy right now, a little bittersweet seeing that you went to 7 with the Florida Panthers. Doesn't help. I don't know if you're a Leafs fan. Would you rather lose in 7 or get swept every single year in the Eastern Conference Final? So that would definitely be up for debate, Ty.
By the way, you mentioned the 1-8 format. Both of these conference finals, these would have been first round matchups if the NHL was doing the 1-8 format, which is an interesting thing to kind of go back and look at and do a little revisionist history. But anyways, one more note on tonight. If you're looking for a positive sign for the Canes, it's that the Panthers are beat up. No Reinhart, no Mikkola, no AJ Greer tonight for Florida as they look to punch their ticket to a third consecutive Stanley Cup final. Let's step away from the playoffs for a little bit. Mathieu Darche on Friday, basically right after our show went off the air, was announced he's going to be the next general manager of the New York Islanders, taking over for Lou Lamoriello. And what an interesting team he's taken over. A roster that I think it's pretty easy to look at and go, it's very, very flawed. Of course, they have some aging vets there. And when you look at a team that has a Horvat and a Barzal and Dobson, Sorokin between the pipes, like it'd be pretty hard to come dead last if you have a goalie like Ilya Sorokin. But at the same time, I don't wonder a little bit if hiring Mathieu Darche, a younger, considered more up-and-coming GM, if that's maybe not a sign that ownership there is saying, okay, you can go the long way here. You can build this properly. You don't need to be back in the playoffs next year or even the year after that.
Yeah, I think he's getting that leash, right? He's getting a chance to build what he wants to build and find some pieces. And I look at this team, I honestly feel like they should have moved on from a few guys last year at the trade deadline. Look at Palmieri, even Anders Lee. There was some value there where you could have moved these players out and got some more pieces to start building. But on the plus side, Brock Nelson getting moved out, getting Cal Ritchie, who is a sure thing, I think is going to help this team. And you have a goalie to build around. There's some good defensemen there. There's some good core. There's some, structure. And what I really look forward to for the New York Islanders team now is a chance to kind of brand some players and start to get to know this team better. For so many years, it's been so vanilla because of Lou Lamoriello. And again, how many of us hockey fans, we get our teams and our knowledge through social media, through Twitter, through Instagram, where we actually get to meet players and get their personalities, where I feel like that's been a bit of a stranglehold on the New York Islanders and their fan base and where they're at. Because I remember playing at Nassau Coliseum early in my NHL career, and the environment there and the energy of this fan base is so fun. This is a great place to be. These are passionate fans that deserve to have a team that can get pushed over the top. I know we touched a lot on Carolina, but when I look at the Islanders, even if they were to get in right now, they're just going to kind of middle around and be gone. They need to start building, and I hope this is where the plan of the future grows for this New York Islanders team.
Yeah, I mean, again, positives if you're an Islanders fan. Again, you have a new voice in charge. You have the first overall pick in the NHL draft. So, you can draft Matthew Schaefer, send him back to junior for a year. Be okay with being bad next season. And who knows, maybe call it 14, 15 months from now, we're talking about, okay, Schaefer's getting ready to jump in. You got another top 5 pick. And you mentioned Anders Lee, JG Pajot, those are their 2 big rental options up front. Keep half of each guy. You're telling me Anders Lee at $3.5 million some team's giving you a first-round pick for that at the draft. JG Pageau, he probably gets you some amount of futures as a collection if you were to retain half on him. Like, maybe you need to make harder decisions on a guy like Bo Horvat. I know there were some rumblings about that. Again, stockpile a little bit here. Go get 3 or 4 really good future assets. Look how good you did in the Brock Nelson deal, getting Cal Ritchie. That trade already looks fantastic, and it was made 2 months ago. You can do that again. You can do that a couple more times here, and it doesn't have to be a 5-6 year rebuild like they're doing in San Jose or Chicago. It can be something that's done in a couple of years when you have the pillars of Barzal, Dobson, Sorokin, and the other guys coming like Schaefer.
I always feel like there is that worry of how much does the rebuild go, right? Because we look at Buffalo, it was ripped down to the studs, and we're still trying to see that rebuild, right? So being strategic with it, where you can mix in a little bit of veteran players with younger guys to keep the culture there and keep it growing, which will be super important, I think, for Darche, creating that culture. And I think Patrick Waugh is a guy being there, working hand in hand now with this team. You know, you start to develop that winning culture, which is going to be so important. But I really think building a few stockpile picks and making sure everyone next year is not nailed down. You can move some pieces out. And like you touched on, JJ Pageau has had good playoffs before. Anders Lee's a big body. Any team looking to go on a stretch run next year, that's a big guy that you can add to your lineup with his experience and veteran leadership.
Yeah. Moving away from the NHL for a second here, Huts, over the weekend, it was a golden goal by Tage Thompson as the USA has their first World Hockey Championships gold medal in 92 years. That is the most mind-boggling stat. Like, I cannot believe that at some point over the last 15 years, as USA Hockey has taken all these steps forward, how have they not stumbled into a World Hockey Championships? But Thompson gets the gold medal winner in overtime. They win 1-0 as well. Jeremy Swayman was lights out. And as you see here in the picture, Johnny Gaudreau's jersey front and center as well, which was a nice touch.
Yeah, that was a very nice touch and a good honor. And I think walking away from this, knowing it was 92 years since they won a gold, is pretty amazing with the players that have come through the United States and the players that have, competed to try to help this team win. And Tage Thompson is a player that I know very well. I got a chance to play with him in St. Louis when he was a rookie, and he was a little bit of a Bambi out there. He was growing into his body. He's a big body, always had a great shot, and there's not many players I played with that could abuse me in practice like him. I don't want to know my save percentage against Tage Thompson in the NHL because it was not very good. He's a shooter. He's lethal, grown into his body. He's a strong player. He plays on the edges. And that being said, that was a great goal yesterday. And another takeaway for me from this win is Jeremy Swayman. Jeremy Swayman played very good. It was a big shutout for him after the ups and downs of the Boston Bruins season with Allmark being gone and Swayman contract holdout. Hopefully this is something that he can build upon and a great win for Team USA.
All right, let's move along to our big segment for the day. It's the Blue Paint. We're going to talk a little goaltending. It's brought to you by Budweiser. Budweiser is encouraging buds to make time for the playoffs, not excuses. Every goal, every win is better enjoyed with your buds. So phone a bud, text a bud, and call out their excuses for bailing on the playoffs. After all, the playoffs are the most wonderful time of the year, so make them count with Budweiser. All right, Huts, let's go through a couple of different goaltending situations here. Let's stop in every every conference final series. And I guess we can begin in Edmonton because Stuart Skinner has obviously become a focal point here. You talked a little bit about his game mentally and how it seems to be in a good spot, but he's such a Jekyll and Hyde goalie, as you kind of said. What about his game on the physical side of it, stylistically, positionally? What changes when he's on versus when he's off?
I think chasing the game would be the main thing, right? So when I say chasing the game, I mean staying between our posts and not really chasing plays outside of our net that aren't going in the net. And that being said, it's a tricky thing to deal with. And something that holds a lot of goalies back is patience. And for Stuart Skinner, when he is at his best, he has his feet underneath him. He's not too wide. He's able to move, and he doesn't get too locked in on that first initial shot. And what I'm seeing right now is him managing his depth well in the crease. He's not getting too far out, being too aggressive. He's letting the game come to him. But it goes hand in hand with the way you defend. And I think this team is defending harder in the D zone, making the game a little more predictable for Skinner. And for him, it's been a tale of two tapes, right? You look at his numbers, obviously, early on. Right now, he's got a 902 in the playoffs. But in rounds 2 and 3, he's leading the way with a 936. So he's been good. And yes, Calvin Pickard has been in some of those games. But for him, it's early in the game, getting into that rhythm, getting the flow going. And then I think there's a confident Edmonton Oilers team that plays in front of him when he sees those first shots. So it's been fun to watch. So less is more with Stuart Skinner would be the best way that I could explain his game.
Now let's go to the crease down at the other end. Jake Ottinger. I mean, for whatever reason, these last couple of years against Edmonton, it has not been pretty, specifically games in Edmonton. When he's played a playoff game at Rogers Place the last 2 years, his save percentage craters to .848. As you look at the 6 goals the Oilers got in game 3, any of the other goals in this series, have they figured anything out with Ottinger, or is it simply a product of he's facing so many quality looks, like eventually some are just going to go in?
I think it's a mix of both, right? I think there's some times you need saves. I thought early in that game, in the first, the Bouchard goal is one where he needs to save. It's a hard shot, but it's on the ice. He's a big guy at 6'6". He needs to make that save. But then again, you look at McDavid's goals, those are very good shots. Those are good goals. Hyman scores on, a breakaway and then another one, which is a partial breakaway where he gets it upstairs. I think just the Edmonton Oilers are doing a good job of getting the puck elevated against him, where he's a big guy. He seals the ice very well. And he's just got a hump to get over, too. This is another guy that has to exercise some demons to get back to where he needs to be. We think of the Dallas Stars, them in the conference finals, where they've been in the Stanley Cup finals. That was Anton Khudobin who got them there. So Jake Ottinger has to exercise some demons. We talk about Connor Hellebuck, having struggling in the earlier rounds. Jake Ottinger is not necessarily struggling, but you have to make big saves at big times. And yesterday he didn't have that for his team.
Yeah, Pat, if you want to flash back up Ottinger's numbers, you see in rounds 1 and 2, like 911, 929 on the save percentage. And, you just kind of said, like, he's not really struggling. And I agree with that. Like, he's not playing poorly, even though you can sit and look at the 3 games against Edmonton here and be like, he's below an 890 save percentage in every single one of them. But when you're only facing 24 to 27 shots on goal, and again, a bunch of them are odd man rushes, Edmonton on the power play, whatever, like, your save percentage isn't going to look pretty.
No, it's not. And that being said, these are the trickiest games to play in, right? When you're not in a rhythm and you're not busy. And during my career, I always remember when I would have like 35 plus shots, my record was through the roof how much better I played. But as you experience, you gain more experience, you play more. Sometimes just when you don't get a lot of shots, you have to stay in the moment and be there. And again, he's only 26 years old. Like, I think the future is very bright for Jake Ottinger, but this is a lot to take on when you're playing against 2 of the best players in the world. And this is an opportunistic team. So that being said, he needs to make saves at big times. And I don't think right now he's getting that. But Dallas also has to do a better job of protecting him. It's not necessarily shot volume. And then we always talk about, as a goalie, I always joke around, like, you can't judge a game by a box score. So when you look at those stats and you're like, hey, he had a rough game, but then you actually see the chances and the goals against, you're like, wow, they're generating a lot of high quality danger scoring chances. But when do you ever get to the Stanley Cup final and not say, wow, our goalie was very good in the conference final to get us there?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a second straight season where, again, somehow after a great first 2 rounds, Ottinger's been the second best goalie in the Western Conference final. Let's go out east. What can you even say about Sergei Bobrovsky at this point? Because it could be he's on the brink of going to a 3rd straight Stanley Cup final. In round 2 against the Leafs, games 1 and 2, he gives up 4 goals in each of those. And then what does he do? 7 games since then, hasn't allowed more than 2 goals against in a game. Like, playoff Bob, like it's a real thing.
Yeah, it's almost early in the game for me. He has like a comforting factor to his team. And he lets his team, if they're not, if they don't start on time, he makes big saves. It's timely saves. Or if they do, you look at some of the other games where he doesn't get a lot of shots and then he makes a couple big blockbuster saves at the right time. And again, it's experience, it's preparation, it's his mentality, it's everything that Bob puts into the game. He is one of the best goalies to be around, the way he trains, his mental aspect. And they highlighted that early in the thing where they were trying to get to the net. It was on Hockey Night in Canada where he went over and he talked to the ref. And that isn't his usual demeanor. Normally he skates to the corner, he stays away from it, he stays in the moment. And something I remember playing against him a lot was whenever he would get scored on, he'd go back to the crease and he would kind of have a reset he would go through. You'd watch him physically do it. He was tap his post, put his glove and blocker on his pads and push his pads together. And he was just resetting himself because he doesn't let it get too high. He doesn't let it get too low. And that's what you're seeing right now is the maturity of the Florida Panthers. And I think with Sergei Bobrovsky as your leader, as your starting goalie, it just is a calmness throughout this room so they can get back to work, whether they score or they get scored on.
And then I guess the last spot we need to check in on is Freddie Anderson, Pyotr Kochetkov, and the Carolina Hurricanes. I mean, Freddie Anderson was so good through those first 2 rounds, but now you almost look back at them and go, okay, was that just because Carolina was dominating games against teams that were inferior to them? But Anderson obviously struggled through games 1 and 2. They go to Kochetkov for game 3. The results aren't any better. I guess if they were to get bounced in this Eastern Conference final moving forward, they just extended Anderson. Kochetkov's under contract. Is this a duo that's good enough to win? Like, do you think they should have a high level of belief in them?
I think so. I think there needs to be belief in them. I'm more worried about Carolina on the offensive front, having a star that can finish in big moments. But we've already touched on that. But for Freddie Anderson, he does have a little bit of a black cloud hanging over him playoff time. Yes, we can look at rounds 1 and 2. He was unbelievable. But if they are to lose out and get swept again, like another year, it's going to be another little bit of just a black mark on his resume come playoff time when he needs to be good. But I do feel like Kochetkov still has a high ceiling. He's a younger guy. He plays with a lot of energy, plays with a lot of jam. My only concern with Freddie this time of year is we see it now. We've seen it with Hellebuck. We've seen it with, you need to have a little bit more athleticism. You need to, because there's more deflections, there's more secondary plays where that second save capability is higher. And I think with Kochetkov, he has that value. I just don't know if he's there yet. I think he needs a little bit of more games and a little bit, I guess maybe just more simmering in the NHL at this level. But that being said, I think Freddie's at a pretty good number for his age for next year. I think you have a pretty good duo, for years ahead here.
Yeah, again, and another thing too in the cap era, and this has always been something that's had me come to the defense of Edmonton's duo. Like Edmonton's duo makes $3.6 million against the cap, and they're signed for next year. And you look at Carolina now, $4.75 million for those two guys. Like you can build, and we've seen it in the past. You can talk about Edmonton getting to a cup final. You can talk about Colorado winning a few years ago with Darcy Kemper, even when he wasn't at his best. There is something to be said of like just get yourself 2 solid goalies, pay them a decent amount, and spend that money on the team in front of them, and you could have good results.
You can, right? And having a veteran guy, even now you look at the Edmonton Oilers with Kelvin Pickard, they had trust in there. He went in, and yes, it doesn't necessarily fit the eye test when we talk about Kelvin Pickard's game and where he is. He's a little bit sloppy. I think if you just ran actual goalie drills and structure, he's clunky, he moves it, but he's a gamer. And that's what you need this time of year. You need guys that can stay with it, make timely saves, be in the moment. And then you have guys that are important in the locker room. So it's important to build around all those structures, and teams understand that. I feel like one of my biggest values when I played was being a good person. It's like there's no stat for that. There's no stat for being a good guy in the room, being a good person, whether it's how you communicate, what you do. So for Carolina, that is important, I think, moving forward, and spending that money in the right areas to make sure you're protected.
All right, let's keep cruising along with the show here, Hudson. Get to our daily face-off inbox question, hashtag askdfo. We got one that came in specifically for you, and you and I were texting about this probably like 3 weeks ago with Jake Allen being on the Sportsnet panel. He's obviously your boy, but we got a question here that says, any of your other tandem members who you always thought would make a good media member back when you played? I guess it could just be a teammate as well.
You know what? I honestly think Linus Ullmark will be good at it. Obviously there's a bit of the language barrier, but he's just a unique guy, and he has so many unique takes. And I think he would be someone that's very interesting, intriguing, and even at times the way he would communicate with me. And I'm not surprised Jake Allen's done well, because he's just, very, well-versed in everything he does. And the only other guy I can think of that would be really good for it is Eric Nystrom. Player, not a goalie. Eric Nystrom was built for the microphone and the camera there. He's not as, probably more a radio guy because he doesn't have the face for it.
Speaking of Jake Allen, by the way, UFA this offseason in a very, very thin goaltending market, that is a nice spot for him to be in, because there are going to be a handful of teams who are going to be looking for exactly what Jake Allen is. He is a high floor, good veteran goalie. Yeah,
and there's value there, right? And again, that's the predictability of the game, and having a guy that is a no-nonsense guy. He's going to come to the room. He's going to put his work in. And what's super important for him, in my opinion, very similar to where I was. I remember my first contract extension was in Nashville. Pekka Rinne knew about it before I did. They called him and said, hey, do you want to play with Carter again? Because they don't want someone in there that's going to be undermining the success of the starter and bitching about games and not being able to play. So that being said, Jake Allen's the perfect fit for that. He can go to any situation, whether he's a 1B or he's a true backup and he barely plays. He's going to help the team. He's always going to be a leader, and he's going to come to work every day. So he's got a lot of value in this market this year.
All right, let's get to our betting talk for Bet365. Want to get in on the action for the Stanley Cup playoffs? At Bet365, they got you. Game props, player props, totals, and money line. You can even bet on futures like series winners and, of course, the Stanley Cup champion. Whatever your bet, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app, get in on the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs, must be 19 or older. I got a couple. One for tonight, shot prop parlay, Seth Jarvis and Carter Verhaeghe. No Reinhardt means those shots got to go somewhere. I like Verhaeghe. He hit this mark a couple of times in his last few games. Seth Jarvis, 3+. It's desperation time for Carolina, and he's the guy who shoots the puck more than anyone else on that team. Comes out to a very juicy +375. And on the right side there, a bit of a unique one. To record a point in every game in the series, you got Connor McDavid at -155, Sam Bennett at +110. If you compare this to Bennett's odds to just get a point tonight, it's great value. And then you go McDavid as well. Could be 2-3 games left in that series, but McDavid should be involved in the offense on a nightly basis, and he's starting to shoot the puck more. +245 for both Bennett and McDavid to keep their point streaks going through the end of the conference finals. Huts, you got a lean either way on this game tonight?
I like it. I like the Panthers here. I think they finished this one out. I know they had a little bit of a lull before they played Vegas a few years ago, and it hurt them, I think, in that series. But I think they try to finish this one early, and they get it done tonight. And the only other bet that I would like tonight would be the block shots for Slavin. I think he's going to be doing everything he can to try to keep his team in it.
I like that one too. All right, let's wrap up the show. A little bit of garbage time. Again, Game 4, Eastern Conference Final tonight. Paul Maurice, always a great quote, and I love this one as well. He was asked about the Panthers being brash and kind of cocky during games and humble after them, and Maurice said, quote, "Have you ever shotgunned a beer? Would you shotgun a beer in church? Okay, that doesn't make you a hypocrite. There's a context and a place for all things." I mean, I asked this question a few weeks ago, but like, if you were to say every coach in the NHL is mass fired and it's a draft style of like the best coach goes first and all the way through, Paul Maurice goes 1 or 2, right?
Yeah, he's going to be up there too. I feel like he's probably a pleasure to work with. He picks the right spots, which is so important. And again, I value this so high is the fact that he lets the players run the room in a sense, right? You put the right pieces in place, and he just kind of leads them out to battle. And you know, he's a quote machine. It's awesome to see his thinking. And then you get the wheels turning, and he's not going to bite on those questions. And he always comes up with some good ones. So it's always fun to see.
When was the last time you shotgunned a beer?
Oh, man. It's been a little while. A couple years. Probably not that. Probably closer than you think. But we were pretty good as kids, that's for sure.
All right. That is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Everybody in the YouTube, you were great. Huts, appreciate your time. As always, Frank Saravalli back in the mix tomorrow with an all-new trade targets board as well. So we'll have that and potentially be talking about the Panthers punching their ticket to another Stanley Cup final. We'll be back right here tomorrow at noon Eastern. See you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.